Hey everyone, so a couple weeks ago I did a video to kind of go over the 5-lug swap and the rear Cobra disc brake conversion that I did on this 87 Mustang GT. Thought I would go ahead and do a breakdown of what I did to the front as well and give you guys some information if you're thinking about either doing the Cadillac Brembo swap or the 5-lug swap. So these are the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S. They are 255/35 18s. They're wrapped on some Rovos Durbans. They're 18x9 in the front and 18x10.5 in the rear. And they're in a black chrome finish. So depending on the light, they can either look really dark or almost chrome and really shiny. And they kind of change with shadows and sun and everything in between. So this is an 87, so it does have the smaller wheel well opening where the 90 to 93 have a bigger wheel well. This one, or maybe it's 89 to 93, has a bigger wheel well. This is the smaller because these came with stock 15-inch rims, and in later years you could get 16, so they made the wheel wells larger. The tires are 255/35 18. It's very important to measure your overall outer diameter of the tire. Your tire manufacturer should give that specifications. And some people go with 40, 235 or 245 by 40s, and everything I measured or that I looked up online, if you went with the 40 dimension, which is the thickness of your profile, it was too big a diameter. Found some these are Michelin and these are 255 by 35, so that gave me my outer diameter was smaller enough to fit in the wheel well. And I still had to put steering rack limiters, so you pull your rubber boot back and there's little plastic clips that you can snap over the shaft in there, and then that limits how tight of a turn you can turn the wheel. I had to put, I think, 1 limiter on the driver's side and 2 limiters on the passenger side. It's one or the other. I might have that flipped around, but I had to experiment. And I know it was 1 on one side, 2 on the other, and then I could get it to where it would stop turning just before any rubbing would occur. You can see on the paint, I don't have rubbing going on this. Oh, sorry, I don't have rubbing going on in this area from when I'm turning, and that's because of the steering rack limiters. And so here's what these steering rack limiters look like. You can buy them on LMR, probably other places. They come in a pack of maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 of them. Again, I used 3 total. Here's a couple I had left over that I found on my shelf. They just snap over the shaft inside that rubber boot, put the boot back over, and then these, you decide how many you want to put on to stop the wheel from turning too sharp. And I can still turn just fine, really. I haven't had an issue where I can't maneuver that well. Okay, so a little bit of a breakdown here, and I'll insert pictures as I go of all the things I purchased. You'll notice I got the Bilstein struts up front. And right off, a couple things. So I put extra looming around my brake lines, and sure enough, you can see there, I'm starting to wear through. So that was an extra layer of protection. Looks like the angle must be off a little bit where it's hitting that tire. So again, I did this conversion 2 years ago, so that's about 2 years worth of driving to wear through that. And I don't drive it a lot though, just a few 100 miles a year. So we'll have to address that. I've got the Ibach Pro springs in here. I've got Cobra style slotted and drilled rotors. These are the ATS Brembo Brake conversion. I've got the S&S engineering bracket. And if I swing around the front here, this has a new steering rack in it from Rock Auto with the sport ratio. It's got the Maximum Motorsport caster camber plates up on the top of the shock mounts. And we got the Prothane tie rod end bushings and spacer there. Got a Maximum Motorsport, what's this thing called? Adjustable for the lowered springs to keep your angles all correct on your steering. I've got new Ford dust shields. So I found a set of 94 spindles that were for sale on Facebook back a couple years ago. I was starting to collect parts to get ready for this swap, and I was lucky enough I found a set of 94 spindles that came with hubs on it, and I was able to get those for like 250 bucks. So that was really good deal. I probably double that now if you found those. I checked over the hubs. They looked good. They spun freely. So I didn't buy brand new hubs. The ones on it did not look very old. However, I did throw away the hub nut and bought new nuts. And the hubs on your 94 newer cars, that those are a one-time use hub nut, and they're really high torque. I don't remember the amount now, but it was up around 200 foot-pounds or something. It took a long torque wrench to get those secured. And now one of my biggest regrets of this whole project was when I got everything put together and I bled all my brakes. Obviously you can see right here that I did not get these bleeders closed tight enough, and I walked away from the project and they started leaking. I came out the next morning and found how a little bit of a drip had come down, and when I wiped it off, it took all my caliper paint off with it. And I did that on both sides. Now, I'm not suggesting anybody, really crank down right away if they do this on this conversion. Don't crank too hard, but I know I made this very tight, and then this happened. So then for the next day, I tightened it even more, came back and looked and saw a little bit of a drip starting, tightened it even more where I thought for sure I was going to strip this thing out. And I had to tighten this down unbelievably tight to get it to stop. And it did it. There's a bleeder on the back and the front. And then, so 4 in total between driver and passenger side. And they all did this. Now, I wish I would have had a local do powder coating, but I didn't have anything like that around me. I sanded these down and then painted them with the caliper paint like that you can buy at AutoZone. And I thought that was going to be good, but this brake fluid will just eat right through that stuff. I don't know if it would eat through powder coat. I think it would have been safe, but other than that, I mean, they've held up really well. I don't have any chips or fading. But while I've got all this apart, I might see if I can touch this up a little bit and make it not as noticeable. Okay, so the general thought here is I'm gonna wipe that area down with some alcohol and some wax and tar remover. Just put a little bit on a towel, wipe off all this area that I'm gonna try to touch up. I'm gonna take my paint, shake it up real good. I'm gonna spray it inside a little bag, and then I'm gonna try to take a brush and fill in that little area as best I can. All right, that should be plenty, and we'll give a couple coats on here and see what happens. All right, well, it took 3 or 4 coats to get that to be one solid color. We're gonna let it dry, and I think it'll match up a lot better than it looks right now. It'll dry overnight, and then we'll take a look at it. I put some new cover over this brake line, and what I decided to do was I first put some smaller diameter plastic wrap over that, and then I followed up with some of this braided nylon line covering, and so it's got 2 layers on it now. It's why it looks thicker than it did before, and it'll move around just fine, but now I've got 2 layers of protection in there, and we'll see if I can't bend that bracket a little bit to move this away from the tire a little bit more. It's not that noticeable to me that I can't turn well enough to just drive around, so that eliminated the wheel rubbing. And so I experimented quite a bit with turning the tires with the car jacked up in the air before I ever took it for a drive. I didn't want that to be the time when I figured out I had a problem, so I just kept turning the wheel from side to side. And what I noticed when I was underneath looking was the back of the rim was going to be hitting the lower control arm here. Is either in the front or the back, one or the other, and so that's when I noticed I needed some rack limiters to help prevent that as well. Alright, so I've got the rim back on. I'm going to click these down. I've got my torque wrench out. I set mine at 85 foot-pounds, and you guys can check your own owner's manual in case that number's changed from year to year, but on mine, that's what I torque mine down to. All right, first glance on the passenger side, I don't see any real rubbing on the brake line. There may be a little bit every now and then, but while I'm in here, I'm gonna take this off, put the plastic loom on, and then put this back over it, so I still have 2 layers over here. And again, very similar, same exact problem as the driver's side, so I'm going to clean this up and try to cover that up a little bit. Everything else is just the same as what I've already went over. Alright, and I got the passenger side done. We're going to let this paint dry, and then I'll come back. We'll do an after picture and see how it looks compared to before I started. And if you're using a torque wrench to tighten your lugs, remember when you're done with it, set it back to 0 before you put it away. Don't leave it set at some torque reading and then put it away for months at a time, because the springs in there, you might mess those up and not have an accurate torque wrench anymore.